Today, myself and my distinguished colleague from Montana, Senator Sheehy, rise in support of what is perhaps the most common sense national security legislation that's come across the Senate floor this year. The No Tax Dollars for Terrorists Act will help to prevent even one American dollar from going to terrorist organizations like the Taliban. American military personnel spent years fighting the Taliban. Over 2,000 Americans were killed in Afghanistan, and more than 20,000 were wounded. It's a slap in the face to these veterans and their families if even one taxpayer dollar would flow to this organization. We need to know that the NGOs and the foreign nations that aid is provided to do not pass those dollars to the very organizations that look to harm us. The Taliban and other terrorist groups in Afghanistan try to erase women and girls from society. Christians and other minority groups face constant threats, including torture, kidnapping, and murder. Idahoans and all Americans deserve to know that not one of their hard-earned tax dollars is going to fund these heinous organizations. I am thankful that President Trump has cut off aid to Afghanistan in an attempt to stop money flowing to the Taliban. This bill that is before us right now will ensure that Congress is made aware of any exploitation of our tax dollars by the Taliban or to the Taliban, and that the U.S. government has a plan to address that. This vote is an easy, resounding yes. It is beyond understanding why anyone would be against this legislation where we are trying to keep money out of the hands of tourists, our money. If Democrats continue to block this bill, as they have done for months, I am committed, and I recommit, to moving it as quickly as I can through regular process in my Foreign Relations Committee. This bill should become law. I urge my Democratic colleagues to join us to ensure that no American tax dollars go to the Taliban, and I yield to my distinguished colleague from Montana.
The senator from Montana.
I want to thank Senator Risch for helping to lead this legislation in the Senate. Most Americans probably find it somewhat surprising that as they struggle with affordability, struggling to fill their gas tank or pay their rent or afford their mortgage, that many of their tax dollars, in fact, upwards of $10 billion of their tax dollars, are sent directly into the pockets of foreign terrorist organizations. Terrorist organizations that we spent thousands of lives and decades fighting to protect our shores, to include the lives of some of my friends. I spent years of my life, as did my wife, spent years of her life fighting these terrorist organizations, trying to keep this country safe. And now we're told that our tax dollars have an obligation to go into the pocket of those organizations, to buy bullets, to build bombs, to coordinate attacks that don't just kill Americans, they kill those who share our values worldwide. And it's not just Westerners and Americans who are killed by this. The Taliban systematically hunts down those in Afghanistan with whom they disagree, those who want to be free, those women and girls who saw a brief period of freedom under our occupation there, and now they are once again placed under the yoke of terrible sexism, of not even fascism, but outright terror. And it isn't just Afghanistan. This extends across the globe. This terrorist financing network is not just guys in mountain caves collecting dollar bills. This is a sophisticated global finance network that spans the entire world. The Iranian regime, although not directly connected in many ways to this, is absolutely directly connected to the international flow of terrorist funds through sophisticated real estate transaction, cryptocurrency, oil smuggling, piracy, kidnapping, terrorism. It is unthinkable that we would intentionally and knowingly hand our taxpayer dollars to organizations that actively kill Americans and attempt to destroy our values every single day. I think it should be a bipartisan American issue for us to finally put an end to this ridiculous practice that is actively costing us lives and precious freedom capital around the world. I hope that we pass this act. I urge a yes vote, and I urge it quickly. Thank you.
Mr. President.
The senator from Idaho.
President, thank you, Senator Sheehy, for those remarks. I think that you're absolutely correct that Americans have no idea that some of their taxpayer dollars are actually winding up in the hands of terrorists. Now, I know there will be people who will say, oh, we can't do this because some money needs to go in there to help women, children, babies, and that sort of thing. What we have learned, if we've learned anything from what's happened in Gaza, is when you have a terrorist organization that is in charge of the country, it is impossible to keep the money, the food, or anything else that's sent in there out of the hands of the terrorists. If you see the terrorists on TV, they always look well-fed, they're well-armed, they're doing well, and at the same time, the babies in the country are starving to death, and the same thing with the women and young children. So with that, Mr. President, this legislation is designed exactly to do that, and that is keep every dollar out of the hands of these terrorists. So I ask unanimous consent that as if in legislative session and notwithstanding Rule 22, the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 260 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered and made and laid upon the table.
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from Vermont.
Pardon me, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object. First of all, what's important for me to acknowledge is that Senator Risch in the Foreign Relations Committee has done excellent work on making certain that we don't get money, taxpayer dollars, to the Taliban. I also want to acknowledge my appreciation for the service of the senator from Montana and his wife protecting us against terrorist activity. Let me explain why I object. Because my objection is not for the purpose of keeping money out of the Taliban. That objective I support. What I don't support is a bill that is written in a way where aid and humanitarian organizations who are spending money they raise to do work we support, and that is protect women and children who are subject to the vicious conduct of the Taliban, that they will be cut off from being able to do their work. The reality is, for some of these NGOs, if they have to pay an electric bill, then the bill is drafted, would mean they are not able to do their work. So when you have an aid organization that's dedicated to trying to help girls, women from the oppression or from the Afghan people who are the victims of the Taliban authoritarianism, and even paying an electric utility bill, even paying a water bill, would mean that organization is shut down and can't do the good work that I believe the majority of us, if not all of us in the Senate, would support. Because our concern is the well-being of the people of Afghanistan, and our objection is to the authoritarian and violent rule of the Taliban. So this bill, as drafted, would interfere with legitimate work that would do good for the people in Afghanistan, especially women and girls, who are the victims of the Taliban. Our government is not sending money to the Taliban. That was discontinued under President Trump. Our government is not sending money to American NGOs or NGOs and governments or our allies. So what this bill is doing is trying to ensure that money that's sent to help Afghan women and children and other vulnerable people is not siphoned off to indirectly support the Taliban. That's a worthy objective, but it's overly broad in how it's written. So it'll literally mean that NGOs that are doing work that we support can't be done. And for that reason, I do object. You know, we've got to keep in mind that the Taliban is our adversary, but there's over 300 million Afghans who have lost access to health services. There's many Afghans who served with our military and to whom we owe a debt of gratitude. They saved, in many cases, the lives of men and women who served in the military. And among the people who have been the biggest advocates for the Afghan people as opposed to the Taliban are many of our brave soldiers who have served in Afghanistan. So the objection here is based on how the bill is written, how it's overly broad and will have the effect of stopping good work that does good things for oppressed people. And that's the reason that I want to assert my objection to this legislation. And Mr. President, while I'm here, I do want to just make a comment on an issue that's going to come up, if I may, and that is this question of what's going on in Venezuela and the fact that there's going to be a potential effort on the part of President Trump to initiate military activity without congressional authorization. And the one point I want to make that I think has to be on the minds of people who take a look at this is that there's an assertion that there's military power to attack boats that intelligence says are carrying drugs to the United States. On the one hand, even as on the other, the president is using the unique power vested in him in the Constitution to pardon one of the biggest drug dealers in the history of the world, and that is the former president of Honduras, Mr. Hernandez. And I want to just note that glaring contradiction. But on the basis of the remarks I gave, although I acknowledge the intent of this bill from the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, I object.
The objection is heard. Senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, the heart of our Constitution is the separation of powers. The founders, having just won their freedom from the tyranny of a king, were determined that the most profound responsibilities of government, whether to go to war and how to spend taxpayer dollars, would be decided by the people. The founders wanted the people's representatives in Congress from all parts of the nation, from all walks of life, to publicly debate and vote on these critical decisions. That's why Article 1, Section 8 of this Constitution says Congress shall have the power to declare war. Not the courts, not the president, but Congress. Yet, as we stand here in this chamber, President Trump is preparing to launch a war on Venezuela, without a declaration of war, without a congressional authorization, without a congressional appropriation of funds. So I've come to the floor to reassert the constitutional role of Congress over this decision of going to war. This bill is co-sponsored by Senators Kaine and Van Hollen and also Brooks and Welch and Markey and Sanders, and I appreciate their partnership. It prohibits the unauthorized use of the United States Armed Forces in hostilities with respect to Venezuela. Certainly, Nicolas Maduro is a brutal dictator. His regime has a long history of abusing human rights and crushing political dissent. That is not in question. And that reality demands a consistent, principled foreign policy. But it does not give permission for any president to violate the Constitution of the United States of America that we are sworn to uphold when we come here to serve the American people as senators. Yet President Trump is still threatening these hostilities against Venezuela by deploying a massive force in the Caribbean. That military force, reportedly, as of this moment, includes about 15,000 American troops, including 2,200 Marines, 11 naval warships, including our largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. and its strike group, It includes amphibious assault vehicles, and guided missile cruisers and destroyers and a submarine. The deployment includes fighter jets, surveillance drones, patrol planes, many of which are based in nearby Puerto Rico, where the U.S. has reopened an old naval base for this operation. The force includes gunships and helicopters and bombers. Military buildups like this take on momentum of their own. A president may hesitate to disperse this buildup lest he look weak and indecisive. And thus, large buildups often result in launching the military action they foreshadowed. My friends, wars are easy to start, but they are hard to end, and the consequences are often devastating. Look at the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Together, more than 7,000 American service members gave their lives. More than 50,000 service members seriously injured, often devastating, lifelong consequences. More than $8 trillion in treasure lost. Launching another reckless war to depose an authoritarian leader in South America is not an America-first strategy. And without congressional authorization, it's unconstitutional. The prelude to this military action has been military strikes on boats off the coast of Venezuela. The administration has said they are acting to stop these boats from delivering narcotics. Well, there's a legal way to do that, and then there's an illegal way to do it. The legal way is for the Coast Guard to intercept the boats, to search them, arrest those present should narcotics be found. And the illegal way is to simply blow up boats in international waters. The legal path is the right way to go. The Coast Guard makes arrests, which allow them to collect evidence and information for broader counter-narcotics operations. Destroying boats and killing those aboard means no evidence or information that confers evidence of what was undertaken. Was it even a narcotics operation to begin with? It is either a war crime or it's a murder. It is a violation of our law. It is a violation of international law. We have a stake in the structure of international law because we want our troops to be treated in a right manner, not to be executed when they are out of the action, laying wounded on a battlefield, not to be murdered clinging to debris after their boat has been blown up. Our military forces don't summarily execute others because we don't want others to summarily execute our forces. That's the principle involved. So the president's extraterritorial, extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean are terrible policy, terrible principles, and a terrible precedent. And we are in a bizarre moment. Bizarre. President Trump, while saying he's trying to intercept drugs, just pardoned the kingpin who organized the narcotic superhighway that delivered 400 to 500 tons of cocaine to the United States of America. Juan Orlando Hernandez of Honduras, former president, convicted on overwhelming evidence of moving massive drugs to the United States of America, pardoned by President Trump. If you want to stop narcotics, you don't go around releasing the kingpins who organized this devastating assault on our nation. On November 29th, President Trump said that the Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed in its entirety, and commercial flights have been greatly reduced as a result. On December 2nd, Trump said the military strikes would, quote, start very soon, and, quote, we're going to start doing those strikes on land. So we don't have a moment to waste to be here on the floor of the Senate defending the Constitution, to ensure that the will of the people on issues of war are respected. If my colleagues want there to be a declaration of war, then bring that to the floor of the Senate, because that's what the Constitution says. And let's debate that. And let's see if there's a majority vote for that. And let's send it over to the House of Representatives and see if they agree, because we took an oath to the Constitution. Thus, I've come to the floor to ask unanimous consent for the Senate to pass the Prohibiting Unauthorized Military Action in Venezuela Act. Again, I thank my co-sponsors, Senator Kaine and Van Hollen, and also Brooks, Welch, Markey, and Sanders, who are stalwart defenders of the Constitution and the constitutional responsibility for Congress, not the President, to authorize war. The bill prohibits any federal funding from being used for the United States to wage war against Venezuela. To be clear, the bill does not prevent the U.S. from defending itself or its citizens against an armed attack. It does not prevent lawful counter-narcotics operations. It does not prevent humanitarian assistance to the Venezuelan people. But it does protect and defend our Constitution's essential separation of powers. So, Mr. President, as if in legislative session and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration of Senate Bill 3344, and the Senate proceed to an immediate consideration. Further, the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid up on the table.
Is there an objection? Senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. Mr. President, I come here, like my colleague, to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Since George Washington was president and he had to deal with a Congress, every president has had to deal with a Congress or members of Congress who really wanted to be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the United States. The Founding Fathers wisely said that that power shall lie in the hands of the commander-in-chief, the President of the United States. Over many, many years, presidents have used military force to protect the United States of America. Indeed, they take an oath that they will do so. Not only do they have the right to do so, they have the duty to do so. So, what are we talking about here? Donald Trump has made the observation, as has every American, that we are losing tens of thousands of Americans, both young and old alike, to illegal drugs that are brought to this country by terrorist organizations, mainly. And as a result of that, we have done, as has been suggested, law enforcement activities within the United States, outside the United States, and we have picked away at it and picked away at it, and it simply has not been effective. What Donald Trump decided to do was to take appropriate military action against an invasion. That invasion comes from those terrorists. They invade the United States of America with boats loaded with this poison. It's distributed around the United States, and it kills tens of thousands of people every year. Now, let's assume that these terrorists, instead of using drugs, were using explosives. If they loaded up one of these boats with explosives and it was headed for the United States of America, and they had a distribution system in place, as they do for drugs right now, and they were distributing these explosives around the United States and killed tens of thousands of people every year, there wouldn't be a peep from anyone about the use of force by the President of the United States to stop this. That is exactly what is going on here. There is no difference whatsoever. The President of the United States, has ordered the troops, when they determine that there is a boatload of these drugs headed for the United States, to sink the boat and put it on the bottom of the ocean. Now, I'm the senior Republican on the Intelligence Committee, and on this, obviously in this setting, I can't tell you the method or the means, but I can tell you that we have seen absolute, total, 100% proof that every single one of those boats that went down was loaded with drugs. So, as a result of that, the President of the United States has done good work so far in stemming the flow of these drugs to the United States. I have told the President face to face, thank you, Mr. President, for what you're doing. And I want to thank you on behalf of the parents who will not have to early bury one of their children because of the drugs that were coming into this country. Instead, those drugs are laying at the bottom of the ocean. Thank you, Mr. President, for what you did. Keep up the good work. Continue to stem the flow of these drugs coming into the United States. The President has the absolute right, and not only that, the absolute duty to do this. If you don't think so, take him to court and sue him. That's what you need to do if you think that that's right. There's no court in the world going to stop him from using military might of the United States to protect the United States, which is exactly what he is doing here. Based upon all that, Mr. President, I object.
Noted.
Would my
Sen-
colleague from
Senator
Idaho
Oregon.
yield to a question?
Does the senator from Idaho yield? He does. Proceed.
I do appreciate you yielding, because too often we have very little debate about these issues. My question is, if the president is trying to stop drugs coming to the United States, why did he pardon the kingpin who built the cocaine superhighway that killed thousands of Americans?
To respond.
Senator from Idaho.
I agreed to respond to questions relating to this. There is nothing in this that has anything to do with pardoning or has anything to do with the other country that you're talking about. So I'm not going to engage in debate on that issue.
Senator from Oregon.
Yield to more direct question to the bill at hand.
Well, the last one wasn't very direct, but if the good senator cares to have a direct question, I'll be happy to do that.
Senator does yield.
Well, I did think it was connected, because you said the mission was to stop drugs from getting to the United States. So it seems inconsistent. But if, in fact, there's so much evidence that these boats are moving drugs, why wouldn't it be advantageous to board them, to arrest them, to collect the evidence and the understanding of the broader drug operation? And why wouldn't it be valuable to show the American people the evidence?
Senator from Idaho.
Yeah, Mr. President, Senator, first of all, that has been done over a number of years, and it has proven to be incredibly ineffectual. I've had lengthy discussions with the Secretary of State, who obviously is a person who's been focused on this area of the globe for a long time. And he says that they consider this, the terrorist groups consider this a cost of doing business, that kind of a boarding or what have you. But what's happened is, with those boats being sunk the way they are, with the people who are in the process of launching this attack on the United States are killed, that has drastically lowered the number of boats that are coming to the United States loaded with drugs. This is the most effective way to do it. Bless you, Mr. President, for doing it. Keep it up. Continue to put these drugs on the bottom of the ocean.
Oregon.
Thank you to my colleague for sharing your thoughts. At least there's a little bit of perspective on the difference of our opinions here, but I do appreciate you presenting your thoughts on this topic. Obviously, I see this profoundly differently, and some of my colleagues are here who would like to speak to this issue. Before I yield to them, I will just say simply, there is no justification in international law for executing people